Picture this for a moment. A floating piece of steel, heavier than 100,000 tons, somehow resting calmly on the ocean surface. Not sinking, not tilting, just gliding forward, carrying thousands of people, hundreds of aircraft, and enough power to influence events thousands of miles away. That's a modern aircraft carrier. It feels almost impossible, like defying nature itself. Yet it has become one of humanity's most impressive creations at sea. Stand on the flight deck at night. Wind whips across your face. Deck lights flash in coded patterns like a runway that never ends. Fighter jets sit in neat rows, engines humming, ready to roar into the dark sky. This isn't just a ship anymore. It's a moving airport, a sovereign piece of land that can appear anywhere on the planet. Aircraft carriers didn't arrive suddenly in the 20th century. They grew out of wild, almost crazy ideas that people once laughed at. Putting an airplane on top of a wooden warship, launching it from a short deck, hoping it could land again without crashing into the sea. Many attempts failed. Many pilots died, but a few stubborn dreamers refused to give up. In the beginning, people only dreamed of lifting balloons from ships to spy on enemies. Then came fragile biplanes that barely cleared the deck before wobbling into the air. From those small, risky experiments, something much bigger was born, ships that could strike from hundreds of miles away and change the rules of naval warfare forever. An aircraft carrier is more than steel and aircraft. It's a symbol of reach, the ability to appear suddenly on any ocean, launch planes without asking permission from any country, and disappear again. It carries fighter jets, helicopters, drones, and thousands of crew members who keep this floating fortress alive. Today we're going to sail through the full story together, from wooden warships with tethered balloons, to the steel behemoths that command the seas. This isn't just a history of ships. It's the story of humans who wanted to fly while still standing on water. It didn't start with F-35 jets. It started with someone brave enough to put an airplane on a boat. Ready to set sail? Then let's begin. Aircraft carriers like the ones we know today, massive steel giants carrying hundreds of planes, didn't appear suddenly. They grew slowly from ideas that people once thought were completely crazy. Putting an airplane on top of a warship, launching it from a short deck, and somehow getting it back down safely without crashing into the ocean. In the early 1900s, airplanes were still very new and fragile. The Wright brothers had only flown for the first time in 1903. Many people started asking the same question: what if aircraft could operate from the sea? No need for expensive land bases that enemies could easily attack. Just launch from a ship and strike from anywhere on the ocean. In 1910, an American pilot named Eugene Ely did something considered insane at the time. He attached a short wooden platform to the front of a cruiser, USS Birmingham. With his Curtiss pusher biplane, Ely took off from that rocking deck. The plane almost dipped into the water as the wheels left the platform, but it climbed into the air. That was the first takeoff from a ship in history. But Ely didn't stop there. 1 year later, on January 18, 1911, he did something even bolder. He landed his plane back on a moving ship. This time the ship was USS Pennsylvania, steaming in San Francisco Bay. The deck had ropes and sandbags rigged as a primitive arresting system. Ely approached, touched down, and the lines caught the plane just before it reached the end of the deck. It was the first successful landing on a moving ship, a moment that changed everything. When World War I began in 1914, navies started taking the idea seriously. Britain converted several warships into the first true aircraft carriers. HMS Furious in 1917 was one, a battlecruiser with a flight deck added forward. Sopwith Camel biplanes took off from there for scouting and light attacks. Then came HMS Argus in 1918, the first carrier with a full-length flush flight deck from bow to stern, no obstructions. They were still slow, small, and dangerous, but they proved airplanes could fight from the sea. From those crazy experiments, the weapon that would reshape naval warfare was born. After World War I ended in 1918, the world tried to prevent another big war. The big naval powers, US, Britain, Japan, France, Italy signed treaties in Washington, 1922, and London, 1930, to limit how many big warships each country could build. Battleships and battlecruisers were heavily restricted by total tonnage. But the treaties had a loophole. Aircraft carriers were treated differently. They were allowed more tonnage than battleships in some cases, and the limits were looser. This encouraged navies to experiment more with carriers instead of spending everything on battleships. The U.S. converted an old collier ship into the first purpose-built carrier, USS Langley, commissioned in 1922. It was nicknamed Langley the Covered Wagon because of its long, flat deck. It carried a small group of biplanes and proved carriers could work as real warships. Britain built HMS Hermes in 1923, the first ship designed and built from the keel up as an aircraft carrier. It had a full-length flight deck, island superstructure on the side, and could carry about 20 planes. It became the model for many carriers that followed. Japan moved fast too. They converted the battlecruiser Akagi into a carrier in the 1920s. By the 1930s, Japan had several large carriers like Kaga and Akagi, carrying dozens of planes each. They focused on fast, offensive carriers that could strike far from home waters. Between the wars, the aircraft carrier grew up. Ships were built from the keel up as flat tops. The US, Britain, and Japan raced to build bigger decks and better planes. The carrier wasn't just a support ship anymore. It became a weapon that could strike far beyond the horizon. By the late 1930s, the stage was set for carriers to become the most important ships in the next World War. World War II became the moment when aircraft carriers proved they were no longer experiments. They were the new kings of the sea. Naval power shifted forever from battleships with big guns to carriers that could strike from hundreds of miles away. Whoever controlled the air above the ocean usually controlled the ocean itself. On December 7, 1941, Japan launched one of the most famous carrier attacks in history, Pearl Harbor. 6 Japanese aircraft carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, Hiryu, Shokaku, and Zuikaku, steamed secretly across the Pacific. Early Sunday morning, more than 350 planes took off in waves and struck the American fleet at Hawaii. 8 battleships were damaged or sunk, but the American carriers were not there, they were at sea. That one detail would change the entire war. Japan's carrier force looked unstoppable in those first months. They conquered Southeast Asia, the Philippines, and many Pacific islands. But the U.S. Navy refused to give up. They rebuilt fast and focused everything on their remaining carriers, especially the legendary USS Enterprise. In May 1942 came the Battle of the Coral Sea, the first naval battle where the opposing ships never saw each other. Both sides fought only with carrier aircraft. It was a draw in damage, but Japan lost the ability to invade Port Moresby. For the first time, carriers clashed directly, and the result showed how important they had become. Then came the turning point, the Battle of Midway in June 1942. Japan sent 4 carriers to destroy the American fleet. But U.S. intelligence broke the Japanese code. American carriers Enterprise, Hornet, and Yorktown ambushed them. In one single day, all 4 Japanese carriers were sunk or burning. Midway stopped Japan's advance and shifted the Pacific War to the Americans. From then on, the Pacific War became a duel of flat tops. Battles like Guadalcanal, Philippine Sea, and Leyte Gulf were decided by carrier air power. Whoever controlled the air won the islands, the supply lines, and ultimately the ocean. The aircraft carrier had proven itself, not just as a support ship, but as the decisive weapon of modern naval warfare. After World War II ended in 1945, the aircraft carrier didn't disappear. It grew bigger, faster, and much more powerful. The U.S. Navy saw that carriers had won the Pacific, so they invested everything into making them even stronger. The age of the supercarrier had begun. In the 1950s, the U.S. launched USS Forrestal in 1955, the first supercarrier. It was huge, over 1,000 feet long, displacing more than 80,000 tons, with an angled flight deck for safer landings. Could carry up to 90 aircraft and launch them faster than any ship before. Then came the biggest leap, nuclear power. In 1961, USS Enterprise, CVN-65, entered service, the world's first nuclear-powered aircraft carrier. It didn't need to refuel for years. It could steam at high speed for months without stopping, carrying more than 90 planes and staying at sea almost indefinitely. During the Cold War, carriers became floating symbols of American power. They were sent to crisis spots around the world. Lebanon in 1958, Cuba during the missile crisis in 1962, Vietnam throughout the 1960s and early 70s. A carrier strike group, one carrier plus destroyers, cruisers, submarines, could appear off any coast and project air power without needing permission from nearby countries. In Vietnam, carriers like USS Enterprise, USS Constellation, and USS Kitty Hawk launched thousands of sorties. Planes flew bombing missions, close air support, and reconnaissance over North Vietnam and the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Carriers gave the U.S. flexibility. They could strike deep inland without fixed bases. After Vietnam came the Gulf War in 1991, then operations in Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, and the South China Sea. Carrier strike groups became the main tool for diplomacy and force projection. Today, with ships like USS Gerald R. Ford, carriers still remain the most powerful mobile air bases in the world, able to deliver air power anywhere, anytime without relying on foreign soil. Today, even the mightiest aircraft carriers face new and serious challenges. The world is changing fast, and the threats are evolving quicker than many expected. What once seemed unstoppable now has to adapt to survive in a very different battlefield. One of the biggest dangers comes from hypersonic missiles. These weapons travel at more than 5 times the speed of sound and can maneuver wildly. They are extremely hard to detect and intercept. A single accurate hit could cripple a carrier's flight deck or radar systems. Another growing threat is drone swarms. Hundreds or even thousands of small, cheap drones can attack at once from different directions. They overwhelm the carrier's defenses, targeting radars, antennas, and aircraft on deck. Many countries are already developing this technology. Then there is the problem of cost. Modern supercarriers like the Ford class cost more than $13 billion each. Maintaining them and their air wings requires enormous budgets. Some critics ask whether such expensive ships can still be justified in an era of long-range missiles and unmanned systems. But carriers are not standing still. They are evolving too. The U.S. Navy has already introduced the Electromagnetic Aircraft Launch System, or EMALS, on the new USS Gerald R. Ford. Instead of old steam catapults, EMALS uses powerful magnets to launch planes more smoothly and efficiently. Drone carriers are also being seriously considered. Future ships may carry large numbers of unmanned aircraft that can fly longer missions with less risk to pilots. Some concepts even imagine carriers that operate mostly with drones, reducing the need for large crews and expensive manned jets. Unmanned carrier designs are being tested as well. These could be smaller, cheaper, and more flexible than today's supercarriers. They might work in groups, one large carrier supported by several smaller unmanned platforms. Advanced defenses like laser weapons are also being developed. High-energy lasers can destroy incoming missiles and drones at the speed of light and at very low cost per shot. They could give carriers a powerful new shield against the threats of tomorrow. Today, Carriers face new threats: hypersonic missiles, drone swarms, and cyber attacks. But they're evolving too, with electromagnetic catapults, unmanned aircraft, and better defenses. The future may see smaller, more flexible carriers or even drone-only platforms. The story of the aircraft carrier is still being written on the open sea. And so we reach the quiet end of this long voyage across the history of aircraft carriers. It's been quite a journey, from those first fragile experiments on wooden decks to the massive steel giants that now dominate entire oceans. This story is full of daring dreams, heartbreaking failures, brilliant inventions, and moments that changed the course of world history forever. Aircraft carriers teach us something timeless and powerful. Power can float on water, but it must keep adapting to survive. They began as risky platforms barely able to keep a plane in the air without crashing. They grew into weapons that decided entire wars, from the Pacific battles of World War II to the modern carrier strike groups that can appear off any coast in the world. The sea remains the greatest battlefield on Earth. It covers more than 70% of our planet, connects every continent, carries 90% of global trade, and hides resources we still barely understand. Whoever controls the sea controls so much of the future, and for more than 80 years, aircraft carriers have been the sharpest, most flexible tool for doing exactly that. From Eugene Ely's terrifying landings on rolling wooden decks, to the burning carriers at Midway that turned the tide of war, from nuclear-powered supercarriers sailing for months without ever refueling, to tomorrow's drone swarms, laser defenses, and perhaps even fully unmanned platforms. They keep projecting strength across impossible distances, adapting to every new challenge. But they also remind us that no technology, no matter how powerful, lasts forever unchanged. Every era brings new dangers. Submarines in the past, hypersonic missiles and drone swarms today, cyber attacks and AI warfare tomorrow. The carriers that adapt survive and remain relevant. The ones that don't become floating museums or worse. Thank you so much for sailing this entire journey with me. I hope you now see these floating airfields with fresh eyes, not just as steel monsters or military machines, but as living proof of human courage, ingenuity, and the endless need to adapt. What everyday object should we explore next? A toothbrush? A mirror? A spoon? Or something completely different? Drop your ideas in the comments below. I read every single one. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe at sea, and keep watching the horizon.